Good evening, friends. A very warm welcome to all of you to this Golden Jubilee Lecture. I'm really delighted that we have with us Professor Nilüfer Göle, a long-term friend of the center, a real friend to many of us, and a wonderful scholar. She's delivered a lecture, and today the proceedings will be chaired by our own senior fellow, Aditya Nigam. So it's a real pleasure that we have both of them here, and may I now ask Aditya to chair the proceedings.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. It is a great pleasure to have Professor Nilüfer Göle speak to us here on what I was taken a bit by surprise, because I have been somewhat familiar with her earlier work, which is largely around issues of religious and cultural difference, and especially on Islam and the Veil. And today she'll be speaking to us on democracy of public spaces, worldwide protests, and lately she's been writing on the struggle around the Gezi Park issue in Istanbul and other parts of Turkey, connecting it to other movements in recent times across the world, from the Arab Spring to the Occupy Wall Street and so on. Professor Nilüfer Göle is a professor of sociology at the, I won't dare to pronounce this French, Ecole, whatever, of higher studies in social sciences in Paris. She works on religious and cultural difference in Europe and the modes of Islamic visibility in the public sphere. She is author of Islam in Europe, the Lure of Fundamentalism and the Allure of Cosmopolitanism. Her pioneer work on the contemporary Islamic headscarf, The Forbidden Modern, Wailing and Civilization, has been published in several languages. She's also edited a book on Islam and public controversies in Europe, which is forthcoming in January 2014. So,
I really feel privileged to be part of this center for many years now, and I thank my friend Rajiv Bhargava, with whom we have been in conversations, exchanges for so long, and I learned so much from him, and I really thank you for being part of this talk series, and to the center who invited me so generously, and also who came to assist, to share with me my new work. As Aditya said, he was surprised because he was expecting me to give a talk on Europe and Muslims. That was also the initial speech, and I was myself surprised, because I think this is what I like about sociology. It gives us a freedom to be surprised by the society and social movements, so that we can reset our ways of thinking. And so in the meanwhile, while I'm working on Islam and Europe issues, I couldn't leave aside these new protest movements and try to understand them. And so therefore I'm sharing with you this, I called it public space democracy, and try to make it clear for you why these words might be meaningful in new ways, because we all know what is public space, public sphere, since the work of Habermas, Arendt, and Charles Taylor with social imaginaries also, but he's also already in the new paradigm, I would say. And then the issues of democracy. What is the difference between public space and politics? And what is the relationship between public space and democracy? These are the very large issues. But the way I want to enter into this debate is in relation to this wave of protest movements. Do we think, or can I make the statement that the Western countries are not the only exclusive home for democratic imaginaries? That is my first hypothesis. It's not a wishful thinking because it is already what is going on. So this is the first undertext of my work, that my paper that I want to share with you, are the social imaginaries, the modern democratic imaginaries are also stemming from places which are not Western European, but other places in the world. And whether you call developing, emerging, Islamic, and so on. And that's why world protest movements, the new wave of protest movements, I think, forces us to think that question. The second one is we almost think conjointly public sphere and democracy, politics. And are there new ways, because we look at these experiences, can we think in different ways, in different conceptual frameworks, the relationship between publics and politics? So that's two questions that are the subtext of my endeavor to put these movements, empirical developments, into a more conceptual framework. So what I mean by this wave of protest movements is from Arab world, including the Western capitals, from Turkey to Brazil, I think they all solicit a new approach to establish concepts of democracy. So this is the Arab Spring with Tahrir Square, in Turkey, Taksim Square, and the Gezi Park movement, we can call it, but also Occupy Wall Street movement in New York, and and the Brazil also witnessed a series of movements. Is there a connection between all these different movements? The first thing I would say, we see that there is a, it is both from Eastern and Western countries. There is a new democratic imaginaries that are coming on the public scene. And all these social upheavals, they are sometimes also connected to each other. And many of, even those in the West, and in the movement that is more called les indignés, outraged, and who occupied also public squares in different cities, from Madrid to Paris, in different really cities of the European countries, they also took the example of Tahrir Square. So we can see the reversal of the imaginary. Instead of looking always towards the French Revolution or May 68 movement, countercultural movements of the American 60s, now we see also how from the Arab world there might be, that there is stemming new even rhetoric, new repertoire of actions coming from Tunisia, dégage, and all this kind of things related with this new social upheavals. So, for instance, to understand these very different movements, a sociologist, well-known Jeffrey Alexander, called them, proposed to read them in the same narrative arc. So saying that there is something common between these movements. And he mentions Occupy Wall Street, Tahrir Square, and even Obama campaign, he would put it in the same, and would say that this should be read in the same narrative arc. And I do agree with it. There are commonalities, although the particularity of each case is interesting, and I'm trying to show you through the Turkish case what are the particularities. And he calls them utopian civil society. Maybe in trying to differentiate my position, it would be more clear what I mean by public space democracy. So he prefers, as many of them, global civil societies, utopian civil societies. So first, I think I'll be telegraphic because many things to say. Utopian, meaning it's literally no place, some ideal in the future. For Muslims, it's already a realized utopia, for instance, but for the left, it is something that should be realized, not yet something in the future, utopia in the etymological sense, no place. So on the contrary, these movements are very located movements, grounded in material places, and they are named according to these spaces. We don't label these movements. We have difficulty of naming them. Is that revolutionary, social upheaval? What is the quality of these movements? Working class movement, youth movement? No, we call them according to this place they occupy. Tahrir Square movement, Gezi Park movement, Wall Street occupying movement. And I think this is already very telling how these movements are grounded They are not utopian, no place, in the sense that they have a place, and not in terms of in the future, that's also what I'm going to argue, but in the present, at the very moment they occupy these places, they do rehearse a new citizenship, to go very quickly, to say that already they try to here and now, they are very present-day oriented, they show a change through and use humor, performance, civil disobedience, and all this new kind of forms of action. So in that sense, I do not think they are utopian, and I do not think they are civil society movements neither, because civil society means they have identities, they come to this public space as organized interests, organized identity movements, whereas these movements are public space movements. All kinds of citizens are there manifesting their differences and their multiplicity. Like in the case of Tahrir Square, we cannot say this was a movement of Muslim Brotherhood. That was maybe the main problem with the Ikhwan government, because they took after the revolution that they were the main political actors, so they thought they didn't take maybe into consideration all the people, citizens, who were present, who really triggered this Arab Spring in Tahrir Square. They were football fans who played a very important role also in the Turkish Gezi movement. So we had women, we had youth, we had Muslims, but also secularists. So we cannot speak about a civil society movement, because public movements means they were there. Maybe many of them were part of these movements, but they went to this public square occupation movements as a person. So that's important. Personal and public is not the same way integrated in public space movements than social movements. Now, in each case, also going in terms of, so I'm saying it's not a global civil society movement, but public space movements. There is a tipping point. Also in the civil society, you get organized, there's not a tipping point. It's like a mass movement, always the tipping point, which a single event that triggers collective protest, angers, feeling of injustice, very emotional, and saying enough is enough, ça suffit, enough is enough. There is a threshold that is not acceptable by many. Who by many? Not a given civil society, by many who feel concerned. Again, not a civil society concern, but so many people. And it was in Tunisia, the immolation of a street peddler, which started the collective protest, although there has been many other immolations in public, but that one triggered the event. And in the case of Turkey, the threshold, which made it unacceptable for people, it was an urban management plan, very easy, urban plan. In the midst of Istanbul, those who know Istanbul, Taksim, and I think it's the same word, means dividing, from a square. At the heart of Istanbul, Gezi Park is this very small public park with trees. So the government, the AKP government, coming from Islamic movement, very developmentist party, and they had this project, destruction of the trees and making it into a better place, according to them. That's a big issue. I don't go into the details of the plan, but in the midst of the Gezi Park, also a shopping mall that was going to be created. And so this urban planning development, taking the trees off the Gezi Park, making a new aménagement, urban, triggered the event, and the youth occupied the public park, public garden. And occupation of the park by the young protesters was followed by police intervention, brutal use of power, force, and then movement gained a national momentum. That's, again, very typical of all movements, how police intervenes brutally, and it becomes a more national, it gains a national momentum, massive support of the middle classes, the spread of the movement from Istanbul to all other Turkish cities, except one, Bayburt. So in all cities, that is 80 cities, 3,060,000 people. I hesitated to give the number because in Indian standards it's nothing, but in Turkish standards it's a lot. And 6 dead, 7,500 wounded, many arrested. So that's just the bilan to give you it. Something happened in that innocently looking young movement of Gezi Taksim Square movement. So people during this, people really went down into the streets, blocked avenues, occupied public squares, and in spite of this brutal display of force by police, they really continued the movement almost for 20 days all around Turkey. Now, what was this movement? Again, going back and forth with different movements. 68, so many people, and I do agree, there is some element of 68 countercultural movement of French 68 movement, because there is this element of ça suffit, we don't want de Gaulle anymore. That is headed against the power of Erdogan, Tayyip Erdogan, who is still in power, prime minister from AKP for now more than 10 years. So there was this element of ça suffit in terms of the fatigue of power, also in relation to the youth movement, which is a bit also communal movement with sometimes reminiscent of 68 youth culture elements in the Turkish Gezi Occupy movement as well. But one thing was different from 68 movement. We cannot consider it as a youth generational movement. There is no generational element. On the contrary, they were not against their parents. There is no rupture with their parents. On the contrary, their parents came to the public square as well every day, and they joined the movement. So there was this intergenerational solidarity. Secondly, of course, which is very reminiscent because it also addressed itself against Tayyip Erdogan, the power, it's Arab Spring, Tahrir Square, first Arab Spring, which is, in that respect, I think the occupation and all kinds of citizens, not everyone, but many, were there. That's an important resemblance. But what was different is a regime change was required, was demanded, much more important in terms of its political claims and consequences in the case of Tahrir Square movement. And it's also majority-minority rights are totally different. In the case of Tahrir Square movement, it is majority who wanted to have a voice in the political system, in the public life, through voting system and alternance. So it is the majority rights in a way. In the Turkish case, it was defense of the minorities against the tyranny of the majority. That's totally different because more and more moving towards an understanding of a political rule based upon majority. So this movement defended the rights of the minorities, but not only minorities, established minorities like confessional, non-Muslim, other Muslim like Alevi religious affiliation, but rather like minorities that can be women, homosexuals, environmentalists, those who are not taken by respect with the Islamic government. So against the tyranny of the majority, that's important, how they feared that democracy was moving towards a democracy of majority. Thirdly, in terms of indigné is the movement of all these European movements that I will call also the Occupy Wall Street movement in that respect. It's like indigné, those who are outraged by neoliberal politics. So now it's more the economic side. And in that sense, they were outraged by neoliberalism in all these movements of European and Occupy Wall Street by the neoliberal politics that escaped political governance in a way. And in that sense, Turkish protesters as well had an economic criticism, neoliberal criticism, but it was more, in a way, it was much more materialized. It is not financial global capitalism, because when we speak of capitalism, it's always very abstract. I say in the Turkish case, it had a name. It means shopping mall. And shopping mall really represented this incarnated, this capitalism and consumer culture and urban development. So it crystallized both the issues of environment in the urban life and also confiscation of the public sphere by the private capital by means of all this the speculation, and therefore shrinking of the public sphere. So we had the neoliberal criticism in a different way, taking a different twist, also because the people who came to the public square were not the victims of development. They were, on the contrary, privileged of developing Turkey. They were the privileged members of developing Turkey. When you look at the, I don't go into these quantitative profiles, they were well educated, many of them with PhDs. All members of your center could have been there. It would be very well represented. And so that was the majority of the Gezi Park movement, but they didn't want that development. They were criticizing because they don't want development at every price. That's the criticism. It's not like neoliberalism is going to eat us, but we don't want that development. That will hinder, shrink our life in urban everyday life, which means, therefore, the trees really meant something. People were interviewing me in Paris saying that, well, what are the real reasons behind this movement? This cannot be only for 3 trees. Well, this was for 3 trees, because trees meant much more than just the environmental or kind of sensibility. It meant also defending public square, the place for breathing, for really citizens can meet. It's also meant freedom of life without having been totally confiscated by all these development plans and private capital. So I just mentioned the word against. It's coming more and more, as you see, you hear more public than civil society. So I would say this movement was against the shrinking of the public sphere, already shrinking in terms of this public belonging to citizens or belonging to urban developers. That's it. And secondly, it was also against the restriction of freedom of expression, control of the public discourse in Turkey more and more by politics of through politics of intimidation against media and journalists. So trying to control the diversity of voices, again like the majority democracy, trying to have much more a voice which is in consensual public sphere. And especially regulation of public life according to Islamic norms. That was the fear also that triggered this movement, because more and more the AKP had some regulations like restriction of sales of alcohol that triggered this anxiety, and more recently the social mixity, gender mixity in dormitories of universities. So for girls and boys who are living in mixed dormitories in the universities, also that brought a big scandal. So these are made always like sales of alcohol. AKP would say we are regulating it. It is even less restrictive than the Western ones. But the issue is always, what are the reasons that you mobilize to restrict hygiene, alcoholism, or Islamic norms? So more and more the Islamic norm discourse was started to be heard, which hurted many people's feelings. And thirdly, in relation to public life again, non-respect for other Muslim confessions of non-Sunnite majority, namely Alevis also. That is important again, this minority issues. And especially in relation to the way the public, political power, government spoke in relation to those who were not in conformity with the majority norms. That is the offensive discourse or derogatory words against people, although he said it in very intimate ways, in many familiar ways, using words that are not, used in the daily life, but these were very offensive discourses. Those who were drinking some alcohol, he used, they are all ayash, meaning drunkard, and also you have the word ayash, hedonism, and that kind of thing, which is very derogatory for people. So ayash, or referring to others, to those who came to Gezi as marginals, as scum, or best maybe as looters. That word, I don't think it exists. It's çapulcu. He used them. They are all çapulcus. You know, they are just nothing. They are not citizens. They are çapulcu, looters. So that offensive discourse also in public life, that was really became part of the agenda of action, public agency of these people. It is not only that they were hurt, they changed this discourse, and they really asked for public civility as part of public virtue, respect. So respect was one of the slogans they used. Other one was resign. I think resign to the government. I think what is more important for me in this movement, what made it so particular, is the respect, not the resign. Okay. And now, what is it, therefore, different? I already gave you some elements to understand the difference of what is particular about public space movement, public agency, which is different than collective agencies, social movements. So I'm not there, I'm separating it from social movements theory and trying to give a new reading of these movements as public agencies, as if public agency has some particularities that social movements cannot have. Already this identity formation, it is through the movement, that is, occupation of a place created a sense of collectivity. There was no we before. They started to experience a transformative we during the movement. That was much more important in this public agency. They became a we, all this youth who were also criticized as individualistic, totally selfish, after these yuppies, some kind of bobos, but no political commitment. They seem to be quite resistant to brutal even force and so on. So, but they gained a sense of we through the movement. It was not before a kind of we. So there is this a transformative experience, a liminal moment, like Victor Turner would say, a rite of passage, but through this public square experience within the public square. And that's why this communal life, like reminiscent of Woodstock, was very important there, because they really lived day and night there. And when I meet these young people now, they're almost nostalgic. They don't know, they want to continue this movement, but it had a very transformative effect on them, because they were together. They never had this feeling of solidarity, doing things together, which also released the incredible amount, potential of creativity, artistic creativity. I'll come to that. So this communal life during the action changed also the form of public agency. So of course that's the most well-known thing you know is the social media, the use of social media. Nevertheless, it was also very interesting. It's not only giving appointments in the public square, but also sharing very trivial, very important medical advices against tear gas, because tear gas was one of the main issues that was terribly used and abused by the police force. That's why there are so many dead and so many people who lost their eyes. And this tear gas, against tear gas, there were some recipes of grandmother recipes with vinegars and everything. So a lot of solidarity between Turkish citizens and on the social media, all these even recipes. Some people are making some research on all this information gathered in the social media. But also more important, they reached out global publics. And people from outside Turkey gave their solidarity, expressed their solidarity with the movement, because it was almost simultaneous. I followed the movement for a month without sleeping on the social media. I gathered all the information. Simultaneously, I was there. When I started writing my articles on the Gezi movement, people said to me, "Are you sleeping there? Are you among the occupiers?" That was the best compliment I could have ever had. No, I wasn't in the square, but almost I was on the square because of social media. They filmed and they diffused the films through Facebook, Twitter, instantly. So now the civic disobedience, this is also very important, that part. Although there has been violent encounters with the police, confrontation, nevertheless the element of civic resistance, especially with female youth, I'll show some pictures for that, civil obedience was very important in that movement, how we can resist, just stand. They were not fighting back, they were just standing. And this word standing, that just keep in mind. And then after the movement, what happened is they continued to create new forms of public agency. One is public forums in every neighborhood. In every neighborhood, they gathered together in public forums and discussed matters and that concerned them, trivial but also more majority. Can we become a public political force? How can we get organized? That kind of things as well. Thirdly, that's very interesting, public fast-breaking meal. That is, it was during the Ramadan. The movement was getting less and less important. And then another performative act happened. That was during Ramadan. There was among the actors of the movement minority groups of Muslims. They came to join, building up slowly by slowly the image who were there. And they were, among them, a group called anti-capitalist Muslims. I have some sympathy for them. And when anti-capitalist Muslims joined the movement, and they initiated this, I find it fabulous, public fast-breaking meal. In the midst of Gezi, in the midst of Taksim, they called it earth meals, earth iftars, yeryüzü iftarları, and Mother Earth meals, more even more close to the translation. And it's also very important because there, religious, pious youth joined the non-pious. I call it cool Turkey because this Gezi movement is like more cool youth, joined the pious youth in that sense. And all classes and all the elders, the parents brought the meal. This was an alternative fast-breaking meal because the ones that were organized by the state, by the government, and this was more besides addressed to the poor, but they were all on tables, they were all packaged food, and they were distributed. It was a kind of, social action, propaganda, and they didn't sit on the street. The one alternative, this one, was in Gezi Park, on the street, which was the most cosmopolitan part of Turkey. That was the place where fast-breaking, therefore, meals took place. People brought food and shared food, and they were sitting on the streets. Besides, an observation, somebody said, these people who knew how to sit on the street, these are not Muslims. They must have learned sitting on the street only by yoga practicing. That's the cool view. I'll come to that as well. So, I think that was a very good sociological observation. I have made it as well, but this was coming from a Muslim. That's more important. So, what do we see? So, what happens? Okay, this is all nice, but I have shown that performative effect is very important, and how humor and artistic performance was very important in public agency. Humor and like the identity movement, part of the identity movement is important. I will come to it because they have called themselves, yes, I am a looter, I am a scum, I am a çapulcu. So they took this identity, and everyone from the very best well-known businessman to poor, no-name young people, they started to present themselves on social media, Twitters, movies. They made movies saying, I'm a çapulcu. Who are you? I'm a çapulcu. That is a looter. So that became the collective identity, a word of stigmat by the government saying you are just nothing, you are a looter. And they have reversed it. That is the humor part and how they reconstructed an identity, a collective identity, by means of turning it into a reversal of the stigma. And performance, I said, we will see another one, is the civil disobedience is best shown by one young man standing in the midst of the public square, a dancer besides. So we'll come to that, like the dervish turner. We will have images to show how the performative artistic side was very important in the public square, and also accompanied by a lot of films and music only for the public square Gezi movement. Now, coming to more general thing. What is the relationship? All this is very nice, but what happened? This is public agency. We understand your point of view, but what are the consequences for political sphere? And what I'm arguing is we have to suspend the meaning of the public sphere movement, public space movement, suspend, and not translate it directly into political power. I think that was one of the main mistakes for understanding Arab Spring movement, because we said Arab Spring, it failed. There's no more spring, it's a disaster, it failed. But what happened. There is, like in a public performance, there is a happening. Something happened. It's like the public square. It's not like street manifestation. They turn towards each other. They engage with each other. It's like a public scene. They have une mise en scène. They have rehearsed a new citizenship. That brèche, a moment, a snapshot opened, you cannot go back to it. But this won't be translated into political force instantly. And maybe never, but it's changed the democratic imaginary, as maybe you would call it in a different in this paradigmatic shift. The democratic imaginary changed, although, and it continues in the Turkish case to change politics as well, but in indirect ways. It will not be transformed into a political power, okay? So the relationship with power is different. That's why I think the word imaginary is more important here. And once you see it as a snapshot, you cannot go back, as I cannot go back. I have to change my work as well. We are all different before and after. As in the Arab Spring, all my Tunisian origin students in Paris, all my Egyptian colleagues, they have changed their ways of looking. There is a paradigmatic shift. So these public movements can have a much more important paradigmatic shift with a very weak political power. That's my thing. But what it meant changing the paradigmatic shift, I say it in a very easy way, it is, we have seen the limits of the reformist Islam, let me put it that way, reformist Islam movement in Turkey. The limits of the reformist Islam, one is they give priority to public order. They give priority to social engineering of the public order, even social Islamic engineering of the public order. They give priority to majority consensual democracy. Now, this movement has shown the limits and put this understanding into they challenged this understanding. Instead of public order, they said public freedom, public sphere movement. That's why it's not how you regulate public order, and we can now take it to a more abstract theoretical level as well, that we are all discussing after post-Habermas theories, not himself only, but all the people who are involved in procedural ways of regulating by legislation public order. I'm against, I tell it very quickly. So this reducing public order to procedural democracy. So these movements tell us that's not about public order, public sphere democracy. Public sphere gives you the chance for experimentation. It is exploration of new ways of relating to each other. That's why this religious secular divide in Turkey is no longer valid. That is, I have been arguing for that, but this became the illustration of it from below, not from above, but from below. The secularists who were there, cool Turkish youth, they did fast breaking, although they didn't have any fasting. That's the problem. With the religious. But that's the first time. So it was really earth consensus from. So the religious secular divide on which the power, on which the political government is still trying to anchor its politics is no longer valid to me, indeed. That's a different level of analysis. And thirdly, so instead of social engineering, exchange, experimentation, voice of the people. Thirdly, not majority, but minority rights. Not minority only in terms of already established minorities of religions, no. Minority, that is people, persons who want to also experiment their identities. Because when we speak of minority rights, as if we have one identity, a kind of belonging to a group. No, these people also had acquired a new sense experience a new sense of we. So all that became a very important sense of criticism to the government in Turkey, almost like in the case of the Arab Spring Revolution. He took it besides. He said, if I didn't, the government said, if I could not have controlled this movement, they were going to overthrow me as they have overthrown Mursi, who all these powers from American, Western Zionists to Gezi Park, this movement. So this very innocent-looking movement, he's right, it's not that innocent, but not because of conspiracy, because it changed the paradigm. Now, I want to show you some pictures to have the visual in mind, and people say the ghost of Gezi is still there, and I think ghost of Tahrir Square is still there as well. Now I hope that everything I said comes into a picture. Am I too long? Finish, 2 minutes. So this is Chapuling. You can just go to every day I am Chapuling. They have written this everywhere. So they played with words. Chapulcu is the word Chapulcu. You are a looter. They are all looters. And they said, okay, we are all looters. And they used in every languages. And it became a verb. I am Chapuling. Can we go to the next? Yeah. That's even now in everywhere. Chapulcu. They are reappropriated by the protesters. And in the hybrid form of Chapuling, that means they are fighting for their rights. I am Chapuling became an agency, kind of. Okay? So this is the global solidarity that I was speaking. Instantly, Noam Chomsky. I'm also a Chapulcu. There's even a video on YouTube you can find. Go ahead. And this became the icon. This is what I mean, civil disobedience. And this youth who never fights back, they just stand still. And this gives a different kind of empowerment. That's not fighting back, but just keeping still. And she's so vulnerable with her red dress. And this is tear gas. This is very, very harsh. And she is, we found that afterwards, she never spoke, a teaching assistant in the Department of Urban Planning. So I said, it can be from here. It could have been a young Indian scholar. And so this became the icon of the movement, because this really grasped, okay, this is on the square, you can go, this brutal use, and then they used all this, more they use tear gas, more we get bigger, okay? But you have it in films and everything. She became the icon. So many, many females. Social media under all circumstances to show that it was burning, Istanbul was burning, and I couldn't go there with my asthmatic background, and many people were very asthmatic, even in the homes and houses with tear gas, you can see. So social media with tear gas masks, okay? And so this, of course, this image of in every movement we find it. This is the global person, just one big, yeah, this anonym, yeah, and it's all this anonymous global, that is the global link, and you find it in a movement of outrage in Europe, but also in Tahrir Square, okay? And this is how they use the communal life with libraries. I use that in my articles. I loved it because they constructed a library. And in the midst of all this fighting going on, so what I mean by performance and having a new communal life, this is it, okay? And they were playing chess, look at it. They had all this kind of very peaceful, seemingly very peaceful, yeah, communal life. And this is the best, I love this image because this is the whirling dervish and with a tear gas. And this was again in the midst of the public square. So you see how the Muslim, that's what I use because, yeah, that's the performative. That's again another one. It really continued. And because it's the Mevlana and turning dervish, he's a dancer, of course. Sandegel is all, you all come. There is this Mevlana poem that everyone can come. You don't need to be from one. It's very universalistic message. No one is excluded. Sandegel, okay. And this is the man I was telling you, standing man. It became also this standing man. And this is also afterwards taken by other movements. Standing man, he was this guy. So he was looking in the midst. And then he really attracted everyone around him. And he just didn't, I think, for 8 hours, 9 hours. But he was a performer artist. And then they said, so there was a lot of, I didn't go into these details because it's more local, conjunctural, more anti-propaganda against Gezi movements from the ruler party and intellectuals. They were saying he was looking to Atatürk, he's a secularist, he wants a military coup, okay? So, and indeed, he was not at all looking, he was looking to media. And in 5 years ago, he had made a performance to be in solidarity with girls who were not accepted in universities with their headscarves. So he was in solidarity with Muslims. And how did he do it? He went into the university, first year class, with a headscarf. So he, as a man, he put a headscarf and he performed and to protest this ban. So again, this idea that they are all authoritarian secularists against Islam, this failed. So that became an icon, also this civil disobedience, keep calm and stand by, okay? Stand up, sorry, not by, stand up, okay? So this is the Earth Iftar, fast breaking. This is very, very crowded, you can see, and very joyous, everyone bringing food. This is really on the streets of Taksim, Galatasaray, where Asaf had his high school in the midst of Istanbul, French high school, Pera, you should, this is and there was a lot of people. This is from my article, yeah. I said transgression of spaces. And this is how you can see, this is in front of his Galatasaray high school. Huh, Asaf? This is, okay. This is a very prestigious French, so this is the whole street, for those who know, just the heart of Istanbul, okay? And this is yoga. And this was a very important moment because there were also yoga people in the Gezi Square. Look, you can see it. Go ahead. And yes, not only few people. And that's it. This is yoga. I would like to finish it with Nazım Hikmet's poem, and I think that poem really reflected this, the spirit of this movement. The soul of libertarians for freedom, and also a unifying movement, like yoga means also unifying, I think, is best up by his poem. And live like a tree, alone and free, live like brothers, like the trees of a forest. And I think public sphere movement means that individual freedom and yet this connection with the others. And in that sense, I think public space democracy needs us to think differently in terms of democracy, West and East impulses. Thank you.